Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina, Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Kristine Frailing, founder of the YorkSewing Center, a creative sewing school in New York City. Kristine is a women's wear fashion designer and sewing instructor, having studied fashion design and merchandising at Missouri State University. In addition to her specialized education, Kristine has years of experience within the industry, including positions at Ford Models, Mendel, Gurhan, and David Yurman. Kristine also had her own clothing business, K.BANASIK, that was sold in stores all over the world. Kristine founded the YorkSewing Center in 2014 and built it to be a joyful, hands-on space where students of all ages can learn to sew, design, and create. From beginners to future fashion designers, they teach everything from machine basics and garment making to upcycling and embroidery, always with a strong focus on creativity and confidence. She believes her clothing and sewing lessons empower students and builds confidence. She's a proud wife and mom to her 3-year-old daughter, Sparrow. Kristine, welcome to So and So.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful. We learned of what you do, and we had no doubt that our listeners would love to know more about you and the sewing center. So we're going to start off with the basics here. How did you learn how to sew?
I started sewing when I was 8 years old. My great aunt was a home economics teacher back when that existed. And she didn't have children of her own, and she really loved children. And she kind of just, took me under her wing and was like, hey, why don't you come down to my basement where I have all of my sewing supplies? And she just loved sewing. So she had basically a sewing room. That was the size of a bedroom, and she had every machine you can think of, and just we would spend hours there.
What was it about sewing that was so captivating for you?
I have always been I was a creative kid, and I just have a very, very creative visual mind. And so as soon as I started like playing around with fabric and seeing her put things, making things come to life, I fell in love with it.
What are some of the things you like to sew?
I love to sew clothes for myself. I also love to upcycle, and tailoring is also something that I really, really love because I think that the way that garments fit you is everything. And so I love going thrifting and just tailoring everything to fit my body perfectly.
So I'm going to quote you here. You've said, "Life in New York City fuels me. I love the energy, the people, and the constant inspiration." Are you originally from New York City?
No. So I grew up in Missouri in a very, very small town called Lexington, Missouri. Only 5,000 people in that town. And another thing, growing up, I always had fashion magazines, and I just thought living in New York City or LA was for me from a very young age. And I always would create clothes. Before I could really, really sew, and my aunt was teaching me, but I would try to make things really quickly before school. So I would take hem tape and I would iron pieces together and make like a tube top to wear to school because I saw it in a fashion magazine. So I just kind of knew I was a city person from a very young age.
So moving from small town Missouri to New York City, which is kind of the epicenter of hustle and bustle, how was that transition for you?
It was something that it was a big dream of mine. I wanted to either go to LA or New York City. So I went to visit LA, and I really believe now, looking back on my life, everything kind of just falls into place the way that it should. And the opportunities weren't lining up in LA. And then I had this opportunity through my college to come and visit New York. And that's where Ford Modeling Agency comes into play because in college, I had worked at a modeling agency there, part-time. And I was like, you know what? I should really try to find something that I can get a great internship in New York City. And I interviewed for Ford Modeling Agency to work with their stylist. So I was on the kind of the behind the scenes, helping promote the stylist in New York City. And it was an incredible opportunity. So it was a very easy transition for me because I had this experience and I really utilized that to get this amazing, well-known opportunity as an internship. And that was kind of the start.
Yeah, you really kind of started at the top with Ford models. Now, during your career, you worked for Ford models, J. Mendel, Gurhan, and David Yurman, all notable places. What were some of the things you did in these roles?
So Ford Modeling Agency was just an internship. I did not formally work there, but I did intern for an entire summer. And I do really take away from that as kind of my starting point of living in New York City and some of the contacts that I made there and just the experience. From there, I ended up kind of transitioning into J. Mendel, which is also a luxury fashion brand that I felt so privileged to be able to work in that environment. I was really trying to work in design, and I found kind of a headhunter, and she was like, "Well, there's this amazing boutique on Madison Avenue in New York City. It's a French designer. They do all of their alterations and tailoring in-house, where the tailors will come in and meet with like the celebrities that try on the clothes or the high-end clientele, and you'll be there taking notes of the fittings. You'll be helping out." And it just sounded to me like I was able to walk into a very luxury brand that was so small that I was going to be able to really be around the seamstresses, even if I was working with the sales team. And that's exactly what it was. I got to work with the seamstresses and I got to work with the corporate office on the design changes. And we got to go there and see that all of the line come out like when it was first released, and they would talk about the styles. And it was an incredible experience, especially as like coming from Missouri and not really being around a lot of luxury brands and then being like right in the middle of Madison Avenue. It was absolutely incredible.
You can just feel the energy when you talk about it. Was it what you expected, or was it more? I mean, I see this person from Missouri just walking into New York City and just owning what you're doing. That's pretty amazing.
I mean, I have to be honest, the experience working on Madison Avenue was very much Devil Wears Prada. That it really was. I mean, the expectations of clientele and the expectations of the people that you worked with were just, I mean, now looking back, I love that experience for me because it took perfection to the next level.
Hmm.
Things had to be perfect, pristine, no mistakes. And that kind of set the tone for the rest of my career, where I wanted to work and who I wanted to work for.
Let's talk about your clothing line, K.BANASIK. Tell us about it.
So after I worked at J. Mendel, I was just extremely, extremely inspired. I moved to New York to be a fashion designer. That was kind of the goal. And as soon as I started working at J. Mendel, I was always kind of designing on the side. And I met a couple seamstresses that were really talented during that time. And so I started working with them and having them help me make some of my samples. And I wanted couture samples. So the line actually started out as couture dresses that were one of a kind that I would sell to clients through a boutique that I had a connection with. And I sold like a few of those. And then as time went on, I decided I really wanted something that was available to anyone and everyone. And I really wanted to be size inclusive. So I created a cashmere vest that could be worn multiple ways, worn by different body shapes and sizes.
And do you still have that clothing line?
No.
So you needed to walk away from that, and then you opened the New York Sewing Center.
So actually the transition there is kind of the reason why I don't have the clothing line anymore. So the vest line that I had created all of these samples and I was getting into all of these stores. But when you have a fashion brand, you really have to have a lot of startup money to really make it go. I was attending trade shows and then I was only doing one season a year. And so I kind of started networking and looking for ways to make additional income. And I started at a networking event. I was just randomly talking to someone and I was like, "Oh, you're a fashion designer. What do you do in between your collections and how do you make extra income?" And she was like, "Have you ever thought about teaching sewing? Do you know how to sew?" And I was like, "Oh, I love sewing. I would love to do that." And she was like, "Yeah, some of the schools in New York York City might have some options for you. And it was like a light bulb went off, and I was just like, I have to do that. That would be so much fun for me. And then I started, working with schools, working with different programs, and nothing was long term. Like nothing had like this, places would close, or like different schools wouldn't have the program anymore. And I was just like, I should just start my own. And some opportunities came up where it just was like perfect timing to do it.
Let's talk a little bit more about the Sewing Center. You have a wonderful business model, and you serve a lot of people. And the way you built this, the story about how you got there. Would you talk about a little bit more about how this all came to be and how you decided to go the direction you did?
So I started teaching private appointments, and then I started having groups come in, and it was kind of like, baby steps, really. I've been in business now for 11 years, and we have, over 6,000 square feet in Midtown just dedicated to our school. And we also have a second location in Brooklyn now, and we're about to open more. But if you look back at like the very beginning, and even now, these steps now of opening other locations feel like the baby steps that were in the beginning. So like in the beginning, it was, renting a space. There was a language school at the time that was a friend, and I was looking for a space to rent for my first sewing school. And I said, "Hey, do you have any extra space?" And she's like, "Well, we have this random yoga room in our language school. If you want to rent it from me hourly and just set up shop every time you have a class." And I went for it. And it was a lot of manual labor that I was doing by myself, setting up shop, breaking everything down, putting it in a closet. And, I never like, there was always that ambition and grit that I was like, I'm going to just come in and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to do it. And that was the first baby step. And then the next one was, hey, can I rent that space permanently, like, or, yearly? And then that was the next step. And then it just kind of grew with getting more in space and more teachers and offering more things.
Now, you mentioned at this point today, you only have two brick and mortar locations. You work online, you have people from all 50 states that you work with. Tell us how you build community through these different channels.
So I'll kind of talk about the start of when we went to online. So during COVID, we had to shut down our facilities in New York City, and that was a pivot moment. We were either going to go out of business or we had to come up with new ways. And like right before COVID happened, I had an idea to start doing FaceTime lessons with students that moved from New York City to another city. And so we had already done that with a few clients. And so we just really launched right into FaceTime lessons before even Zoom started. And then as soon as we started hearing about Zoom, we took everything from FaceTime to Zoom. And it was kind of like this easy pivot moment. And that's when we, introduced this across the United States.
So, the community, the people that you work with, do you feel that there is a connection? Is it different between the people you work with online and in person, or are they, what's the sense of the community to you?
Yeah, it kind of feels like you already have this connection when you meet, because everybody is really a creative person that comes in, and there's this automatic like friendship between the two of you. And,
Hmm.
so yeah, I think the main thing is like this common interest. And then, we've all been there. Anybody that sews knows that. In the beginning stages of learning, you have a lot of questions and it's hard to find the answers, even online, unless you have an expert there or somebody to say, oh, yeah, the reason that your machine is doing that is because you forgot to put the presser foot down. I mean, that could take you hours if you're alone? So I think it's like this, just like this feeling that you have this friend that can help you. And that's kind of the community, is like we want to help them grow. We want to see them succeed. And we also really just want them to have the joy that we get from sewing. And that's what the vibe is at the sewing center, and that's
Hmm.
what it feels like when you walk into the place. You can tell everybody's doing it because they love it.
I know you've said that you thrive in the community that you built, and that's obvious, Christine, when you talk about it. You
Thank
can
you.
hear it in your voice. So I thought my next question is around something that I thought was pretty cool. In addition to classes, people can come and sew at the center for $10 an hour. How did you come up with this idea?
So, when I had my clothing company and I was really looking for a space to rent, I just didn't have the funds to rent my own space, and I started working out of a corner of a factory and I asked the factory manager if I could come in and use the space while they were working just to work on my collection or maybe to teach a private lesson. And he had told me at the time, he's like, sure, you can come in and just, pay me by the hour. And at that time, I was in my 20s and I could afford $10 an hour. And that is really what cultivated my career. I was
Hmm.
able to use that space, utilize the machines, and fast forward, almost 15, 20 years later, when I had the opportunity to get more space, I was like, I need to offer this option to anyone and everyone that is a creator that wants to start a brand because it is so inspiring to be around other creatives, and I don't want to take that away from anyone. At the time, I had to work out of my apartment and I was alone during the day, and I just remember feeling like these moments where I would just have to get up and like go for a run or just like to get myself excited. And then once I started working out of the factory and just being around other people sewing, I just had this like energy. And so when we opened the designer membership, that's what it was. I was like, I need to offer this to anyone and everyone. And it had been in my mind that I was going to do this since I did it with the factory.
How many people come in and sew on this hourly rate?
We're open 7 days a week, and sometimes we don't even have enough space.
Oh,
It's
wow. That's great.
we're expanding right now. We're actually getting an additional area on what the floor that our membership is on, just so we can utilize this space because we also have private offices that we rent out monthly to fashion designers to really build their brand and have a private office where they can lock it up at night, have their machines, have an employee come in and help them. And it's really just this way for, someone to get started in fashion design if they want to build a business and pursue their dream, but not have to pay what it would cost to rent your entire own space.
Now, you mentioned earlier, you talked about COVID and the effect that it had on your business. During COVID, sewing masks was really important to you. And there's a story about a video you posted, the result, and the people you served. Would you tell us that story?
Absolutely. So my parents were essential workers. They worked in a grocery store at the time. And my parents had to keep working. And my mom was on the phone with me telling me that, we have to keep working. I'm really nervous about getting COVID and they don't have any masks. They've run out of masks. And I told my husband that night, I said, you know what, I should really teach people how to make masks so my parents can get some and anybody that's an essential worker or hospitals can have these. And so literally the next day I got up and his response was, "Do you know how to make a mask?" And I was like, "I think I can figure it out. I'm gonna try it." And sure enough, the next day I did. I went through all the categories of, what an approved mask would have to have, and I posted a video, and it went crazy.
And what were the results of that? How many masks did you end up making?
So we started creating these classes on Instagram Live, and we started sharing it with anybody that wanted to get involved. And I was teaching people how to make the masks and where to get resources and where to drop them off. So we had people emailing us from hospitals. We need masks. Could you please send some here? And so we had a list on our website of hospitals or organizations that needed masks donated. And then we also had all of these live classes running where people would tune in and we'd have hundreds of people watching how to sew these masks. And it just throughout all of these people out of all of this community that kind of jumped in, it was about 10,000 masks that were donated um, through that strategy.
That's notable. That's pretty terrific. I'm going to quote you again here. You've said, "I've always loved expressing myself through movement and making, from dancing and baton twirling as a kid to sewing and fashion design as an adult." Tell us more.
So it's really funny. So the baton twirling, I'm now in my 40s. I didn't even touch a baton. I haven't touched a baton since I was probably 18 years old. And recently I just thought about like the connection of just like being in the flow state. of, creating and sewing. And I started thinking back to hobbies I did in high school that also put me in that flow state and how happy it makes you. And so I ended up buying some batons. I wanted to teach my daughter. And I was twirling a baton the other day in the living room. My husband's like, "What are you doing?" And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, this is something I used to do all the time." And sure enough, it made me feel that same exact energy that I do when I'm sewing, which is there's like this rhythm of sewing that you get into and you have to just kind of stay with that. And that's the same as dancing or any sort of creative movement. And so I'm realizing that it kind of all flows together. And I'm also a music lover. We just introduced our social sessions in Brooklyn where we have a DJ come in and play music while we all sew together, and like kind of just all quiet, or like, kind of movement a little bit while you're sewing, and it's incredible.
You were talking about the rhythm of sewing. What are some of your favorite things to create?
I love making dresses. I love doing alterations. So recently, I've really gotten into the sustainable side of fashion with only buying. I mean, I try to only buy vintage clothing. Occasionally I have to buy, certain things from a new store. But for the most part, most of the things in my wardrobe at this point are vintage, and I will upcycle them or tailor them. And I love it. I just think that the art of tailoring and making something fit you is just, it's perfect.
So tell us about one of your creations that's special to you.
So I recently started upcycling denim jackets with music lyrics or important phrases. And so as I mentioned, I'm very inspired by music. And I think it really takes you into a creative state of mind if you're just listening to music and thinking about maybe what you're going to create or visualizing what you want to create. And I started listening to some song lyrics and they were really moving to me. And so I just started journaling these specific song lyrics from songs that I loved that really inspired me. And then I decided that I was going to learn embroidery. We had recently gotten a new embroidery machine, and so I started embroidering the lyrics all over the jackets, and they just looked really cool. And I started wearing them and posting about it, and a lot of people wanted to do it. So that's something that I'm really passionate about right now.
Do you have a favorite lyric?
Um, I do. As I speak, I create, which is from, it's actually not a lyric. I also read a ton of self-help books and listen to speakers on kind of envisioning your life and manifesting. And one of the manifestation speakers had said, like, what you speak is what you create.
Hmm.
So if you say you're going to do something, more than likely you will. And if you talk about it in a really positive light. So I just embroidered on my jacket on the back, as I speak, I create.
What's your favorite part of your day?
My favorite, well, waking up with my daughter and my husband is definitely
Uh-huh.
definitely my favorite part. And then, I really enjoy a couple of minutes of alone time manifesting and journaling.
What inspires you?
People really inspire me, art, fashion, but I would say people for sure.
Kristine, what's next for you?
So we're planning to open up many locations throughout the United States, and I'd love to really lean into helping other businesses and entrepreneurs get where they want to be. Right now, the designer membership, like I said, people inspire me, and being around, all of these young people that are in their 20s that are pursuing their dream, and I can see myself in them, and I'm like happy that I can be there for them to kind of help them get going. And they'll text me or say something to me like, "I just sold 5 of my pieces," or, "Thank you for pushing me to get this out there." And I really see that being a huge dynamic with these new sewing schools and also the new designer membership spaces popping up.
You mentioned opening new brick and mortar locations. Do you have some planned in the near future?
I have one in mind. We have not signed a lease or anything like that, but I do have another one that's brewing. And my hope is that, I can open up a couple of these every year.
So we've talked about what's next. What's your dream?
My dream is for this to be a very well-known brand and for people to know that they can access any type of sewing facilities at any time to learn and also to utilize for themselves. I kind of look at it as, when WeWork kind of opened, it was kind of this revelation of, oh, you can work from this cool spot and you can have coffee and make friends. And I really want something like that for sewing creators because nothing like that really exists. And so, until the New York Sewing Center did it. So I'm really excited to kind of open that up, branch it out, and open in a lot of different cities.
You shared a lot with us today about you, about the Sewing Center. Is there any question I didn't ask that you wish I had?
I mean, I think you really asked a lot. Yeah, you covered pretty much all of it.
Good, good. Well, Kristine, it has been wonderful to talk to you today. And as our listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can reach me at the New York Sewing Center at gmail.com, or they can DM me at the New York Sewing Center on Instagram.
Wonderful. We're gonna keep our eyes on you and the New York Sewing Center because it seems like there is a lot to look forward to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for joining us.
Absolutely.
Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you, someone for whom a passion became a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I'd like to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.